Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. Today we're going to be continuing a program that we started the last time, our discussion on child sexual abuse in the Catholic Church and how we in the United States, how our church in the United States and our own diocese, the Diocese of Trenton, is responding to this crisis and reaching out to the victims and also to try and help everyone heal and to come to a blessedness in hearts that have been hurt so badly. Last time we talked a little bit about the mechanism that we've set up in our diocese and that we really have had in place for a good number of years now, and also how the dioceses around the country pretty much respond to the needs of child sexual abuse. We talked about how there are victim assistance coordinators and how the bishop has assigned certain folks like myself and Maureen Fitzsimmons, who is back with us again, to try to help those victims, and how we get together with a board, and in the board we discuss not only our policies, but we also discuss the aid to the victim, and also we discuss the perpetrator, the one who maybe has done some of these acts. And with us last time and with us again now is Steve Goodell, a lawyer, our legal advisor, who helps us so much, not only in the incidentals, but he's also helps us with his own caring heart. As you know, I'm the pastor of St. Paul's in Princeton, and I've also been doing an awful lot of work with our bishops for, oh gosh, I don't know how many years now, but a good number of years in this area. Maureen and Steve have both worked with us in working with our bishop, especially in the statements that came out in 2002. But I'd like to just share with you our own Bishop Smith, whose heart is so much with those who are hurt in these kind of abuse situations. He said this, he said, like you, I am profoundly saddened to know that so many instances of sexual abuse have occurred nationwide. The victims, their families, and the entire Roman Catholic family have suffered because of these terrible acts perpetrated by members of our faith, members of our clergy. It's impossible to imagine the damage done and the suffering endured by victims of this atrocious behavior. It is impossible. Even the work that we do, my good friends, we try to feel, we try to respond. But unless you've gone through something like this, I don't know how you can ever actually feel fully what's been done. But we're doing our very best, and I'm glad you're back with us again. And Maureen, thanks for being with us. I know you do so much work at Catholic Charities, but you know you're the arm that really allows so much goodness to come out of the work we do. So Maureen, thanks. And Steve, again, thanks for coming back to our program. I know you're a busy guy and a great family man and a great lover of children. But I think sometimes when we all get together, it's nice to know that we're doing our very best to move us to where we should have been a long time ago. Again, maybe we'll just bring us up to date. In your hearts, we spoke last time about the response team and how there's a group of folks, professional folks, that try to help us and try to give us some advice and give the bishop some advice. How devastating, you know, as a lawyer, as a mom yourself and a professional person, how devastating is a crime like child abuse to the victim? That said an awful lot, just the way your face went.
Yeah, it is devastating. The enormous pain and the recurring trauma that these people live with on a day-to-day basis is almost unspeakable, which is one of the reasons why it's so difficult for victims to bring their case forward, because each time they talk about it, it's a re-traumatization of the event. So it's very painful, and all of us who are involved in this ministry experience that pain on a vicarious level, which is why it's really important, I think, for you and for me especially, to be people who have some clinical training so that we can process some of the issues that the victims bring to us, and we can then be better able to help them in their journey.
You know what I worry about? I don't know if others worry about this, but no, we've touched on it a few times. I know we have to do our work, and we want to do it, and we invite the victims to call up and do the process that's here, and we certainly love to somehow clean this all up, and I know we're doing a lot of work even with future priests or religious coming into our ministry, so that hopefully history will look back and say, you know, they went through a lot of heck and pain, but they made not only the church a better place, but they made hopefully our communities a better place, and hopefully our world a better place. One of the things I kind of worry about at times, that let's say a victim of abuse, and now they go into a church and we talk about it, or they listen to the television, they talk about it. And, you know, did they get re-victimized? Is that something else that we deal with? Hopefully we can help them with.
I think that's a real possibility, that it could be a triggering event, which is why it's so important that we have a pastoral bent about what we do, so that the person, the victim, knows that they have our support and that we are there for them. As a matter of fact, from the very first moment a victim contacts us, one of the first things we do is offer counseling.
And we probably can even say this now publicly. If somebody needs counseling, we would love to be able to share that in a good, honest way, so that they should not hold back, thinking that, you know, that they can just push it aside themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that the victim chooses the counselor. We do not choose the counselor. And the only requirement we have is that it be a licensed mental health professional.
And that's for their safety and,
yes,
and for their goodness. Mm-hmm. Now, would you say, Stephen, Maureen, that since 2002 or since the charter, have many more people come forward and expressed, that crimes have happened to them in the past?
I think that it's hard to quantify exactly whether there's more or less. I think that there have been cases that we've gotten. I wouldn't say steadily, because there were a lot of people who I think reacted to all of the publicity in 2002 and 2003. Back then, you couldn't pick up a newspaper without seeing some issue in the paper about the Catholic Church, about Boston, about Dallas. There were many different hotspots around the country, if you will. And so when it was so much in the news, I think people who may have been victims from years ago began to think, gee, should I come forward now? Is this the time? And so there was sort of a bubble of complaints then. I think that has trickled off. And now the people that we tend to see are people who are coming forward with events that happened long, long ago. We've had cases from the 30s, from the 40s, from the 50s. People who, I think, have finally said, I want to get this off my chest, and therefore I want to come forward. And it looks like the church now has a mechanism that will allow me to come forward and unburden myself. And that's where, obviously, you two come in as being people who can be very pastoral or provide counseling. And so it's important that people know that that's there.
And I think it's good to say that when they do come forward, we do our very, very, very best to realize that it's not easy for them to come forward, and that there is an awful lot of pain, not only in themselves, but maybe their family, or sometimes someone could get married, or there's a whole lot of other ancillary kind of things that go on in someone's life. Maybe for a little bit we can also talk about that there is a legal process sometimes that happens, isn't there? That not only is there the work that we can do as counselors or try to help them, but sometimes it gets to be a process that gets legalized.
There are a number of different ways that have become legalized. I think that the most important, and certainly the one that's most in the public consciousness, is the criminal process. If there is an allegation of abuse, and if that allegation is true, then there was a crime that was committed. And so we have to get the criminal authorities involved. And in New Jersey, that means the local county prosecutor's office. Sometimes those cases can be prosecuted, but more often than not, because they deal with matters that happened a long time ago, the statute of limitations prevents a full prosecution. So we always have to be aware of that legal situation, which is the criminal situation. There's also a legal process that can be involved if, again, there is an allegation and that allegation is found to be true. There's a process involving the priest or the abuser. And we have to make sure that If that person is, for instance, removed from the ministry, that canon law is followed. And that's another legal procedure, one that is within the church. And finally, there's the civil process. Many times, and again, we read about this in the newspaper, victims decide that they don't just want counseling, they want something more. They want some compensation for their losses. And in those situations, sometimes lawsuits are filed. And those would go to the civil courts for disposition.
And then once they do that, then it just is that process that goes on. Sometimes there's mediation, or sometimes there's just other processes that have to happen.
You know, the civil legal system is a difficult system. It's one that causes everybody a great deal of pain. And so when we can, we try to avoid that process. And there are other mechanisms that are out there, like mediation. So if we get a complaint, we try to steer it towards mediation. We get a mediator that both parties trust, and we sit down across the table and see if there's something we can work out.
Not always easy, Steve, is it? I mean, there's a lot of pain. I mean, this whole process has a lot of pain, in it. Any experiences that you might be able to share, you know, with our folks, how the process impacts the victim? I mean, I think we've had some experiences where victims seem to really heal, and we've actually celebrated prayer or mass with some families, and it seems that it was a very fine experience. Maybe other experiences, they're still in that process of trying to work through this pain, and maybe they realize that, yes, you're trying to help us, but there's still a whole lot of stuff there. Steve?
There can be situations where no matter what our outreach has been, there's still a great deal of rage and anger. And I think that certainly one of our goals is to try to show that the church as an institution cares and wants to always reach out. Sometimes the victim hears that and accepts it. Sometimes the victim hears it and doesn't accept it, and is interested in, well, we have seen in other situations in other dioceses, not really here, where money becomes an issue. And that becomes very difficult. You have to deal with that the best you can. You have to make sure that you're protecting the interests of the church, while at the same time acknowledging that there's probably a real hurt here, and maybe compensation is warranted.
If someone's listening to us or hearing us and seeing us, and they're a victim, and they haven't yet responded, what should they do?
Well, we would encourage anyone who has been abused by a clergy member or anyone who works for the church to come forward. And that can be done by going to our diocesan website and checking the telephone number of Monsignor Gregory Vaughan, who is the Vicar General, and he is the first point of contact. And from there, it flows that he contacts us, and the process begins.
And we can assure people that when they do contact us, that we take it very, very seriously, and we do try our very, very best to help.
Absolutely. And also, if it's an abuse that occurred in another diocese and the person now lives here, he or she may call us, and we will make sure that the complaint gets to the hands of the victim assistance coordinator in that diocese.
When you talked about the victim assistance coordinators, I know for a long time, because I was one of the first starters of some of this. I don't know how to say that, but every year in Chicago, we get together with other victims assistance coordinators, and right now there's almost two prongs to it. One, we kind of talk about the perpetrators or the priests and what we deal with them, and then there's another side to it that just talks about victims and how we can help victims. And that's an ongoing process that we all learn from, and I know you and I have both been to these programs and processes that's very, very, very beneficial. What happens, Steve, if the statute of limitations is gone out? We don't make that determination, do we? That's the prosecutor who actually makes that final decision, I think.
Right. There's two different statute of limitations that we're talking about. For the criminal statute of limitations, the prosecutor would make a determination of whether or not the case is just so old that it can't be prosecuted. And that's a determination that they make, obviously, on a case-by-case basis. Now, there is no statute of limitations criminally for a sexual abuse case. The statute was amended in 1996 to make sure that the statute was no longer there. So, rule of thumb is that if the person turned 25 by, I think it's June of 1996, then the statute is likely run criminally. But that's the prosecutor who makes that determination. We don't make that determination. And I think that something else, another point that I'd like to make is that it's very important that everybody knows that if a complaint comes to us, if somebody calls Monsignor Vaughn, for instance, or one of you with a complaint, it immediately will go through me to the local prosecutor to make sure that there is an independent authority that reviews it. The other statute of limitations is the civil statute of limitations. And that's one that would bar bringing a civil lawsuit after a certain period of time. And again, those cases are judged on a case-by-case basis.
Now, even if the statute of limitation is gone, someone could still call us and we would still be willing to help? And how would we do that, Maureen?
We would follow the same pattern that we talked about earlier. We would certainly offer counseling immediately. In some cases, the person is already in counseling. And in fact, a therapist may have said, you really need to bring this to the church in order to complete your healing process. And sometimes people just need that suggestion that, gee, I really do need to bring this to a mental health professional. And we stay with the person. That's just the initial point of contact. And there are sometimes that involves the family of the victim as well. We will pretty much arrange for anything that helps the victim feel comfortable and move toward healing.
In our first program, we did talk about the charter, and it had a couple of steps in it. One of the steps that we haven't really talked a little bit about is that every diocese was to have a process like we do, and we were sort of proud because we already had something in place. But does every diocese have a victim assistance coordinator or somebody like that?
Yes, and in most cases, I'm happy to say there is a victim assistance coordinator. In Chicago last year, there were 127 victim assistance coordinator people present, representing 87 dioceses throughout the United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. And it serves, the Chicago meeting serves as a great support mechanism. And it's also attended by the head of the Office of Child and Youth Protection, Teresa Kettlecamp, and her deputy director, Sheila Kelly. And this year, Cardinal George came and celebrated Eucharist with us and stayed in dialogue with us for.
So we're serious. I
Yeah.
mean, the bishops are very serious about this, even though sometimes people think that maybe not, but they are very serious.
I can tell you one of the things that's been done is there have been audits. The bishops agreed that they would be audited, and there is a group from Washington who goes out every year into each diocese, looks at the records, talks to us, and determines whether or not we're doing the job. Are we doing what the charter requires? It's a group of, I think, former FBI agents and law enforcement officers, and so they know what they're looking for, and they really help to keep us on our toes.
And we welcome that, even though it's kind of more work for us.
Labor intensive, but yeah.
But it's an asset to us to know that there's somebody else who can say to us, you know, you're doing a good job, and thank you, keep up the good work, or maybe even finesse it a little bit, you know, if we have to do such a thing. But I think it's nice that we know that we've had that audit, and how long now? We've had 3 audits, I think.
Right. And we've passed with flying colors each time. Which
is nice. I know Bishop Smith is very pleased with that, and he does that kind of work. You also talk about the audit now, Steve. Tell us a little bit about, there was a study, John Jay study, that wanted us to realize what we should look for or what we need to do.
Well, when the bishops met in June of 2002, they really rewrote the book on how to deal with sex abuse. And one of the pressing issues at that time was trying to get a handle on what's the extent of the problem. Because before that, we really only had anecdotal evidence. People dealt with cases one at a time. And so we wanted to know how widespread is this issue. And the bishops agreed that they would pool their resources and pool their data. And John Jay College was used, the criminal justice college there with the social scientists. And they asked every diocese to go through their records back to 50 years and determine how many complaints had been made against priests, and then to report that data. And the John Jay study brought all of that data together and published it in January of 2004. At that time, I think, again, there was a lot of press. A lot of the issues came back to the mainstream press. And we were again asked questions. What are we doing now to prevent this from happening in the future? So the John Jay study was a chance to look at the breadth of the issue to see how widespread it was.
We talked a little bit before about counseling and how we offer counseling. I think it'd be good to let our folks know, is there a fee?
Oh, there's always a fee when counseling is involved. However, the diocese is very happy to cover the fee. And as I mentioned before, the counselor may be chosen by the victim. However, the person must be a licensed mental health professional.
Which is good to know, so that if someone's poor out there or something like that, they just don't hold back.
Right.
Lots of things have happened since 2002, and we've talked a little bit about, I think, how if someone wants to enter religious life, there's the process is maybe fine-tuned, or they make sure that the person is psychologically fit. What else has gone on to help us in not only our diocese but other dioceses? Because now I think we've expanded our scope to not just clergy, but everybody who's working with young people. And what's happened in our diocese up to the present time?
Well, the Safe Environment Program is what you're alluding to, and I know a little bit about it. I know that the diocese has invested a great deal of time and effort to make sure that there is a safe environment for all of the children who are being educated in the diocese or who participate in sports in any way connected with the church. And there are certain criteria that must be met by all of the people who are involved in teaching or coaching. And it's very extensive.
I also, yes, Steve.
The other aspect of that is the background checks. Part of what the charter said was that anybody who has association with children should be checked, and the diocese went through a lot of trouble, I think, to find a way to do that effectively, and eventually found that the state police could offer that service. So now we make sure that everybody who has dealings with children through the church has a background check through the New Jersey State Police.
I also think that when you're in that process, that Virtus process, that you are asked to update it all the time. So that there are certain things you have to read and sort of check off, and just so that all of our folks know this, even our priests have been fingerprinted and deacons, so that there is a process that is ongoing also with those who are ordained or who in a religious life deal with our youngsters and our people. You find in this process so far working well, or we have a continuation of how we're going to continue?
Yes, I think it's working well. Can we improve some of the process? Probably. And we do come together as a body to discuss where we are and where we're going. It's my hope and my prayer that we will see a great decrease in the amount of clergy abuse. And hopefully we will be able to to intensify our efforts to work with those people who have been victimized.
Something that we haven't really talked about that I think we should mention is that at least in the past, and I don't mean that wouldn't happen in the present, but that there are some who are no longer allowed to function as priests or as religious or teachers or whatever in our church, and that sometimes people ask that, well, what happened to Father X or something, and we can assure them that in certain situations people have been removed, and Steve did talk a little bit canonically, but if we are pretty sure that someone is not to be part of our process, they are no longer functioning as a priest practitioner, so to speak.
That's right. There are a number of reasons for that, but certainly that's what the Charter calls for. When a priest is removed, it varies according to the situation. Sometimes it has to be a very public process, and we have had situations here in the Diocese of Trenton where very publicly the bishop has gone and removed a pastor or a priest and then discussed the issue with that parish. Those are very, very sad and difficult occasions, but if that's what needs to be done, that's what will be done. There are other times when the particular person we're dealing with does not have a parish. We don't have to worry about that situation. And quite frankly, there are other times when we go through the process and we determine that it's not appropriate to remove somebody. And we do that only when we're really sure that that's what ought to be. And again, knowing that the prosecutor has reviewed a situation.
But we do that very, very, very carefully to make sure that no one could ever be in a situation. I would like to just take this moment to thank you, Steve and Maureen, for the tremendous love you have for families and children and the church. I also would like to take this moment to maybe let the folks know that wherever there's been hurts, we really do apologize as a church, and that we really do feel that we will do our best to make sure it never happens again, and that we do ask the church to be vigilant, to be prayerful, to be forgiving, as well as ask for us to be forgiven for things that have probably happened. If you're a victim and you'd like to talk with Maureen or myself, please contact us, Monsignor Walt Nolan, 609-924-1743, or Maureen, 732-747-9660. We do love you, and anybody who's been abused, we do ask you to bless us as we will bless you as best we can.